All right, so session 4, this is the biggie, because this is where we say, yep, I'm in it to win it. And so hopefully the wives' dinner helped and was able to answer some questions for your wives. Welcome. This is the group that will be working together through the rest of this season, and this is the group that God's going to use in this particular ministry to affect the lives of other men and families and churches and our community. So we're excited to have you all here, and whether that's one person, whether you're working with your son, whether you're working with a group of guys, we're excited to see what God's going to do with all of that. So let's start out with our questions. Why did you decide to continue? What made you decide to say yes? Because your first instinct was to say no. I like it. There's a special room in back for guys that go, I got this. We go, come on, let's go talk. God's got it, but I'm just hanging on. So, yep. What else? Any other reasons that you said, this is what I think I'm called to do? Because that's the question we've asked you all along. This is your calling?
It's a way. I'm not, don't consider myself an evangelist. But I know that we're all called to go out and make disciples, and this is the way that I can do it, and it seems to work for me.
Yeah. I mean, we're not all born Billy Grahams, but this is a way that some people, we all are different parts of the body, and this is a really effective way for a lot of us to reach out and let God work in our lives and other people's lives. Anything else? One more.
My wife said yes. I mean, and I
That's the first good thing.
Jokingly, we had a very, very hard conversation last night. And you just get so busy doing so many things, and she had a list of things that I'm involved with, and a list of things that she's involved with, and says, do you really have time to do? Because when I'm doing business, it's all or none. And I do that with everything I do. And so we had that tough discussion last night. She said, I do support you, but I want you to look at this, because you don't always look at this before you. I said, I'm definitely called. I said, God called me. I don't know what it looks like yet, but
Yeah.
He's made it clear.
Awesome.
Where he wants me. If my wife would have said, I really don't support her, I don't think to do this, I probably wouldn't either. Because she has to be on board with my time and my efforts.
Yep. And that's why we do this process. I tell folks over and over, and I mean it, we make it harder to say yes than to say no. Excuse me. Yes, harder to say yes than to say no, because I don't want anybody, I mean, as guys, we kind of go, you get fired up and we're going to go take the hill. And it's really important to have our wives go, is that really the right hill sometimes? And so that's a really important process. To be honest with you, the first year that we did this, we got about halfway through, just a little bit before halfway through, and we're kind of working through, and one of the mentors said, I went and talked to my wife about it, and boy, I thought I'd done a really good job of explaining what was going on and what and why and how. She didn't really understand any of it. So we actually built the wives' dinner halfway through the first session, because we knew the wives are so important, and this is a time commitment. It is something, there's nothing that you're going to do that is this important and intentional that doesn't take time away from something else. And so if the family's not willing to have that trade-off, doesn't see the benefit, Christ and for the family, then we don't want you to move on. So, what are you most excited about?
Me,
Wow.
new brothers.
I like to learn about people, so I'm
Yep. Yep. Help others, learn about people. Anything else?
Another chance to do it better this year.
Yep.
Class.
Another shot in the batter's box. You know, and that's, I think a lot of us, we end a year and we see the things, man, I wish. But God uses all of those things. And so, you don't want to get too down on yourself because you wish you would have done this, because God was in it the whole way. And so, I'm probably most excited about the opportunity to get to know you guys, and especially the guys in my church, and really grow those bonds. To see who God calls to be mentees. And the other thing is, it's been fun to watch our church, the guys get closer and closer together. But what I'm starting to see now, 3 or 4 years in, is the wives are getting closer and closer together. And that's very cool to watch the wives talk to the wives in really meaningful dialogue, really caring about each other. And so I'm excited about all of that. So what are you most fearful about? What scares your socks off?
Time commitment,
Yep.
on top of everything else that we got going on.
That is legitimate. The time commitment. What else?
Probably the unknown.
The unknown? Yeah. This is the time of the year that I always start going, we've got a really good group of mentors. Paige is kind of blank on the old mentee side. So, okay, God, let's start filling the coffers on that side now. I'm a planner kind of guy. I'm a list guy. So I just as soon have full lists and not have to wait on God and trust God. But that's kind of the phase that we're in right now. Anything else scare you?
Not bad, can I screw somebody else?
What do you mean they're going to be watching me? Yep, absolutely. All right, so we're going to watch a little video, and Todd's not here tonight. He's been gone a lot and is going to be gone a lot throughout the rest of this week. And so he and I talked, and I said, go home, spend some time with your family, because that's the most important thing. So that's where Todd is. My ulterior motive is I like different, or not different, but I like longer videos than he likes. So I got here and I went, let's see, oh, there's that video. We're going to replace that video with this video. So Todd, if you're going to watch this, it's not the video you had planned. So, and I hope in this room we can hear it. This is a video that's different than probably what you would expect. It's done by a surfer guy, and it is a video about his experience as he, as a Christian, lived his life out in a utterly non-Christian environment, and how he developed a mentoring relationship with another guy. So we'll watch it, and then you can either tell Todd that he can't get leave anymore or not. So
one of the things never kind of forget. I had just signed a new deal with Imperial Motion, and we needed somebody to capture, everything I was doing, whether it was just living my life or traveling. And I knew how important my relationship was with a photographer, so I decided to, look into different photographers and see who I'd work well with. And I remember, hearing from Michael Powell, another pro surfer, and he was saying he had shot with Benton and Benton did great work. And so Michael gave me Benton's information, and I gave Benton a call.
Wanted to get breakfast and just give him a call back, was interested in shooting photos, yada yada yada. And wanted to go get breakfast. And I remember going upstairs and just because I was out in the front yard of me and my girlfriend's place at the time, and when I got his message, and I remember telling him, or telling Kira, I was like, I was like, why does this dude want to get breakfast, If he just wants to shoot surf photos, let's just get up and the waves are good. There's no reason to go and get breakfast and be all buddy-buddy.
As I started to open up about myself and talk to him some, it was a really kind of unique moment, because in not so many words, he basically alluded to me like, hey, I know, I know what you believe, I know who you are. I don't want to hear one effing word about it. And I just remember thinking I kind of smiled on the inside, because in that moment I realized that you've just thrown a target on yourself.
Yeah, but little did I know that at the time it was, it was something that, it was just crazy. Looking back on it in retrospect, it was something that it was a complete life change. And it's, I never would have, if you told me 3 or 4 years ago that this is what my life would be like, I'd tell you to get lost.
You've just made it to where it's like you just told me that you don't want me to share my faith with you. And I knew that this was going to be one of the greatest challenges, because I'm a talker and I'm not going to be able to talk to him about the Lord. I'm going to have to live it.
I think the next swell went up, or maybe it was a super small day, I think. And it was knee-high waves, and he took out a finless longboard. And we actually got a couple sick shots, and then that's kind of how, I don't know, we just had a good time. And I thought that, I still wasn't sure what to think about him. I thought he was cool. I thought he was a little weird, but everybody's a little weird. Weird is a good thing, but yeah, and then it just kind of took off from there.
The first project that we really did together was Make-A-Wish Foundation. There was a kid, his name was Robin. He had a dream to be a pro surfer. And so I had the opportunity and the blessing to be able to invest in this kid's life for a day. And so I called up one of my friends who was a video guy and called up Benton so that we could fully give this kid the full experience. And part of the reason why, it was so important for me to have Benton there was I knew that he needed to see more than a surfer. He needed to see a life that was lived out, that was about other people. We ended up going on a trip for ESM, and we head to Nicaragua.
Dude, Nicaragua was really the time where, honestly, I can't say it, but dude, that's where my whole, things changed for me. Towards the end of the trip, that's where things changed.
I remember sitting in a hammock, and Benton and I, we've known each other now for probably a little over a month. And I'm sitting in this hammock and just kind of reflecting on that thought of being humbled by the Lord. And it's already been humbling because I've seen, how much better everybody is than me on a trip. And Benton walks out and he goes, "Dave, what are you thinking?" I always knew that if Benton asked me a question, I was going to give him an honest answer, regardless of if it involved the Lord or not. And this was the first moment ever I was actually able to say something about the Lord. And I shared with him, like, man, like I'm thinking about humility and what I really, need to improve my life, and how humility needs to be a part of my life, and I need to humble myself. And I remember, it was funny, Ben kind of looked at me really weird, and he's like, what are you talking about? The funny thing about Benton was he used to know how to kind of weave a tapestry of F-bombs. It was like one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And so, I mean, he's just looking at me, he's like, you're nuts, dude. He's like, and he's with all the other surfers on the trip, and he's just going like, you're the one guy who's nice, who's trying to help people. And I just remember relaying with Benton in that moment, as I was laying in that hammock, that, Ben, like, there's so many things I could work on in my life. And there's so many things I can improve. My life's not perfect. I have issues, I have serious issues.
That's when the Lord started working on my heart, like was then. And because I remember, the Waterhouse was giving me troubles. We were down to the last day. We were flying out, taking a cab with a rental car back to the airport that afternoon, and we had one last morning session in us. And I remember, the main focus was me and Dave going out together. But all the other guys paddled out with us, but my main focus was getting shots of Dave.
And so we start to paddle out, and as we paddle out, I'm looking back, always kind of checking on him, and I make it out, and I turn around and look back, and Benton's gone in. And so I turn around and I go in, and I go up and I said, hey man, what's happened?
Yeah, and the water housing, dude, it was just a pain in the butt. It flooded, came back in, dealt with that.
That's where it was like the Lord spoke to me and said, you need to pray for him. You need to pray for his equipment. Because Ben was kind of at that point freaking out about the fact of like water leaking into his housing, water leaking into, and ruining his camera. And I remember as soon as it was like, you need to pray for him, going like, no, man. It was like, there was the other side of it where it's like, man, you better not pray for this guy, because if nothing happens, and if none of this works, Benton's gonna go further away. He's gonna think this God thing that you believe in, this, like, all this is crap. And so we ended up finding crazy glue and fix the button. And Benton goes, all right, I'm gonna go out. So I go and I wax my board, and I get ready to head back out. And as I'm walking down there, I'm like, man, if Satan's working on me this hard, for me to not actually go pray with Benton is probably pretty important. And so I looked, and I started walking down to the water. As I get down there, I get about 5 steps from him. And Benton turns around and looks up at me.
And I asked Dave to say a prayer.
And I just started laughing, because I was just like, I said, man, that's exactly what I've come to do. And he goes, all right. And I'll never forget that moment, because I laid one hand on Benton, and I laid one hand on his camera. And I just remember saying, Lord, and I prayed out loud for him, and I said, Lord, I know how much you love Benton. And therefore, you have an immense interest in the things that he cares about. So Lord, please protect his care. If it means something to somebody you love it too. So protect his gear and help us get this.
Yeah, he prayed, and no joke. Dude, the Lord answered our prayers. We paddled out. I was able to swim out. No joke, I was able to swim for 2.5 hours without the water housing leaking at all. And we got like 3 or 4 good shots. A really rad sequence of him pulling into a barrel. And honestly, after we got, a handful of shots, the housing started leaking. And and that's when I was like, you know what? Like, we got our stuff, let's just go in. And we went in, looked at the camera, saw there were no water drops, nothing. The photos looked rad. We were stoked.
And it was like the housing lasted long enough for us to get that photo. And so when he went and he plugged the image in and I was upstairs, I just remember hearing the guys downstairs just kind of be like, dude, that photo's sick. And in that moment I knew that we got the photo. And Benton came upstairs and shut the door behind him and came into my room. And he goes, Dave, I can't say that I never believed in God, but I sure as hell never believed that he answers your prayers.
And yeah, and I was like, man, like, dude, is this real? Like, is God real? What the heck is that for? Like a prayer answer.
And this photo will always show me that God is real, and that He listens to us when we pray, and when we pray.
And then I remember another thing crazy about that trip is on the way home we were talking, we was like, dude, wouldn't it be rad to go on a trip just together, you know? Like where we could kind of do our own thing. And David and I are like in that respect where we like to invest into the people in our country. And not just go there and surf their waves and do all that and not invest in them.
We head to El Salvador next, and
yeah, that's where David and I's friendship really was able to grow, and that's where my faith continued to grow.
And I remember we started having housing issues again, and it was just funny. So we're kind of going through those same issues.
And I just had the worst string of luck with water housings. And then, man, and it's just crazy. Like, Dave's personality and his perspective on life was really just like, dude, it's like, what do you want? Like, what is this guy on? Because I want to be on that.
We're shooting this lookbook, and I remember one day we were going up to this volcano. We wanted to go shoot up there, and we just kind of wanted to explore El Salvador. And I'll never forget, because it was the first time Ben just flat out asked me. He looks at me and he just goes, Dave, when did you first realize that God was real? And as we drove up, I just kind of started explaining to him, I've gone through things in my life. Deaths of a father, deaths of people around me, a lot of hardship. And I realized that I have a God who can look at all this stuff I'm going through, and He sees it like a storm. But God is so big, He's outside the storm, and He sees the beginning, He sees the end, so He knows it's going to be better, but He also knows how to get me through it. And I'll never forget that. Benton just yelled, stop. And we stopped, and we looked to our left, and at that point we'd made it to the top of the volcano, and we looked out, and sure enough, there's this storm in the middle of it. And you can see the beginning of the storm, you can see the end of the storm.
It was a rad trip, but it wasn't about surfing. It was, but it wasn't. And that's what was really neat about that trip. And it really, and I remember after El Salvador when I started going to church. And I started going to church.
We come home from that experience, and we'd had a few other talks about the Lord, but Ben was in such a different place by this time that, Christmas was coming up, and I felt like, the only thing I could do now is I could actually probably get him a Bible and let him ask, these own questions when he reads the Word, or, get him a Bible and he can kind of look into it and read it now that he's kind of listened to me a little bit and he's more open to it. So I got him one. And he comes over to the house. I gave it to him at Christmas time. And I said, man, if you ever have any questions, just ask me. Well, I was hanging out at our boutique that my wife and I own. Sure enough, Ben comes running up. It's raining, and he has something tucked under his shirt. And he goes, Dave, can I ask you some questions? And he pulls his Bible out. I go, yeah. So we go upstairs to our office, and he opens his Bible. And he goes, explain what this means. And he opened up to the portion of scripture that says the cost of being a disciple. Basically the cost of, what is the cost if I decide to follow Jesus? Well, you're not going to ask questions about that unless you're considering it. And I just remember smiling and thinking back to the beginning and going like, man, this guy's considering it. And so I explained the things to him. And after that, he'd asked, hey, can we, and Ben slowly became my best friend. And, he is the guy who I'd hang out with, who I'd share life with. And then finally he asked if he can go to church. And I remember sitting there in church and, just kind of going like, man, I can't even look over at him because I believe the Lord had been doing something in his life. And he means so much to me. Like, if he even hints at making a decision for the Lord, I'm going to lose it. And so I remember our pastor had finished, speaking and all this. And one of the things I love is he always gives an invitation if somebody wants to accept the Lord. And I remember, I'm somebody who I love actually looking and seeing people accept the Lord, because to me there's nothing greater. But this was so different that if I even saw him hint at raising his hand or doing something, so I actually had to turn my back away from him because I couldn't even fathom it, because I knew I just erupt into tears. And so, church ended, we left, and I didn't think anything of it. He didn't say anything to me. And about a week later, I was getting ready to leave and go home, and I get this phone call from Ben. And he goes, Dave, when I was at church with you, he's like, I know, I didn't say anything, but that day, I decided to accept the Lord. And I just had to call and I had to let you know. And I just couldn't contain it. Just because I've always wondered why I've been given a surf career. I'm not the best surfer. I'm not. But when he called that day, everything made sense. My career made sense. And I realized my career wasn't about me. My career was actually about Ben and Samson. And there was nothing greater I could ever do in my life and in my career than share eternity with somebody. And it changed my life. And it's one of those things that I'll never be the same. It's like, surfing's great. It's fun. But in the end, it means nothing. I remember telling my wife that I told her, and this was after I met Ben, if you were to tell me I could never touch a surfboard, I could never get in the ocean again, I could never ride another wave, would I sacrifice all that so that Samson would come to the Lord? And this was before I went to Nicaragua with him. And I told my wife, I said I would sacrifice all of that. I would give up everything for Bethany to come to the Lord. And it just blows my mind to think that the Lord goes, man, Dave, you don't have to give all that up. I'll give you the things you want. I'll give you the desires of your heart. Because if your heart's aligned with mine, I love Benton. And I love you and I care about the things you care about. And he did that.
I know that wasn't fair the first time.
Well, it's Tom's fault. He made me cry. I'm back there bawling. So, why would we show that video at a meeting like tonight?
Show what God's capable of.
Show what God is capable of.
Building a trusting relationship.
Building a trusting relationship.
What's important is not about us.
Yeah.
We all have a story.
Yep. Yep. So, as we're going through, I just kind of scribbled notes. So, what was the first thing that the Christian guy gave the other guy? I mean, very, very first thing. I wrote down his time. He didn't preach to him. He just gave him time. He just spent time with it. He just lived out his life and invited this kid into it. And he waited. And he waited for the kid to be ready. And he waited for God to give him the right moments. And then when they were in there, they went on that first trip and he's sitting in the hammock. And the kid walks out, and Benton walks out and says, "What are you thinking?" What did he do?
He was honest.
He was honest. He was more than honest. He was vulnerable. He said, I'm sitting here thinking, all these guys kicked my butt. I mean, why am I even here? Because all of these guys are better surfers than I. And he was just really just vulnerable. And this is something that we've learned, and all of us know it in our heart, but it really crystallized when somebody said there's a difference between transparency and vulnerability. I'm transparent enough, I show you enough of me to control you. That's transparency. I show you enough of me so that I can get you to do what I want you to do. But vulnerability is I show you enough of me that you can control me. And what he was letting Benton into was his heart. And Benton could have agreed, he could have made fun of him, he could have gone and told all the other guys, he could have done all these things. Because he gave him that ability. He gave him the car keys. And as a mentor, it's really, it's easy to think that I'm being vulnerable when I'm really being transparent. So it's really about vulnerability and opening yourself up, because I can promise you, no one will open up to you more than you start out. So he lived his life with him. So then they went out for that last surf run, and the water housing was leaking. So they come in and fix it. And what is God telling the surfer guy to do? Pray. Not just pray. Pray with this kid, right? Be bold. And what was the other little voice saying? No. Man, that's spiritual warfare, guys. And that's Satan using our brokenness against us. And we've got to, when we hear those words, when we hear the words of God, we need to just do it. And when we hear those other words that we know are condemning words, we need to cast them out in the name of Jesus. Spiritual warfare is alive, and it happens. So he was going to go down and pray, and obviously God was talking to Benton too, because he went from this F-bomb throwing guy that said, I don't want to hear about it. And he turned around and he said, pray for me, pray. And so they did. And I love so then they go on the next trip, and I love Benton's quote, and it's actually the title of the little video. He says, I wanted to know, what is he on? Because whatever he's on, I want to be on. And that you heard in Juarez when we were down building a house. And there was a guy, the son of one of the families that we're building a house for, sat up on a hillside and watched the whole week. And when they were and never talked to us. And obviously had probably, if not gang, at least thug relations. And at the end of the week, when the pastor came to dedicate the house, the son called him over. And the pastor said, I want what they have. And he didn't speak a lick of English, and guaranteed we didn't speak a lick of Spanish. But he wanted what we had, because we had Christ in us. And that's the living out. He loved Benton so much that he said, with a clear heart, if I never get to surf again, the thing I most love to do, the thing I make my living at, if I never got to surf again, I'm good. My career was about that. So I I've already spent way more time than I probably should have. But hopefully that video touches your heart and helps you see that the topics that we're going to talk about are really important. And the monthly meetings that you get together are really important. But just living life in front of those guys, nothing makes up for that. That's what they need. That's what they need. And that's what God is going to work in. So, tonight, so your homework was to think about your life and kind of just write down what are the highs and lows in your life. And I'm sure you guys all spend hours and hours, copious time doing that. Well, one way or the other, you're going to get to do it tonight because that's what tonight's about. So, this is a process through a guy by the name of Donald Miller. It's called Storyline. And we just love it because the whole purpose of this is for a mentor to understand what God has given him throughout his life. And then to simply be ready to pour that into another group of men in an intentional kind of way. So what's going to happen is, as you go through this, you're going to see that you're part of a larger story. So a meta-narrative is a big story with a whole bunch of little stories in it. And all of this is God's story. Also, you guys on your table, you should have gotten the rest of the last 3 sessions. So that's what we're going through here. So we're all part of God's story. And that is the story of Scripture from Genesis to Revelation. And that's God's story. So, if our story is a part of God's larger story, and you look at the Bible, the chronology of the Bible, from God swept across the water to Revelation, what words come to mind as you think about that larger story of Scripture? The Bible is a story of redemption. What else?
People's
Relationships. With Him and with each other. Life. Love. That's, for me, the Bible is God's love story. Grace. Failure. And redemption through that failure. Relationship. Redemption. Life. You did pretty good so far, guys. You must have read. Love. Salvation. And restoration. How wonderful will it be when he was talking about Benton, and he said, what could be better than spending eternity together? How awesome is that? How incredible. So, the Bible then is also the story of all of these people who have their stories that are within the umbrella of God's stories. And they all exist within the larger story. In that video, when they were talking about what is God, and God said He's outside, He said God's outside of the storm. And God gave him that picture of a storm that you could see the beginning and the end. I love that because if he's outside of the storm, he knows that we're going to get through it. And he can help us get through it. And our job is then to exist in the larger story. And our choice is, do we contribute to the larger story or not? What do you think of that? I'm going to say it again. Our job is to exist, to live in God's larger story. But our choice is whether or not to contribute to God's larger story. What might I mean by that? Or do you think I'm just completely lost?
Do you want to be a disciple here?
Yeah. I mean, do you want to do it? Are you willing to do it? Are you going to live out your life the way that Christ wants you to and do the things and be courageous, or are you not? I mean, I don't want anybody to yell heretic and throw me off a cliff or anything, but I always wonder, was Noah the first guy that God said, build an ark? I don't know. We don't know because the people that say no, they don't get their name in the Bible. Right? Did everybody that had an opportunity to walk with Jesus do it? No, right? The Bible says
Jonah said no.
Jonas tried to say no, but he could have kept saying no. Yeah. So I believe that God's plan, God knows, and it will happen. It will happen. God's all-knowing, all-seeing, and it will happen. My choice is, do I contribute to that, or do I not? So let's take Moses and they left Egypt, and God took them right to the edge of the promised land. And they sent over spies, and they came back, and what happened? Anybody remember?
2 said yes, 10 said no.
2 said yes, 10 said no. The majority said no. What did God say? Take a lap. Take a lap. That's my little, in my head, you read the Bible, especially Old Testament, and you see times where God gave people opportunities and gave them the opportunity to either do it or not do it. And if they did it, what happened? He blessed it. And if they didn't do it, take a lap. In that case, a 40-year generational lap. Right? Those people made a choice. God's plan was they're going to get into the promised land. But he has all kinds of time. So our question is, are we going to contribute? And how then are we going to find out how to contribute? And even more in this case, how are we going to help the guys that we work with to come to those same decisions? So, we contribute to the larger story with our lives, with our stories. So what if the positive and negative turns in your life have prepared you for something great? What if? your story matters to God. I mean, matters to God so much that he's going to help you by, when you have the courage to pray, that he's going to have the courage, he's going to love you so much that he's going to keep water out of a water housing that's leaking for 2 hours. Because you had the courage to do it. So your story is part of God's story. Just like Joseph's story was part of God's story. So this is Joseph's timeline. And you can see here, this is just a piece of it, but what he's done is he's highlighted the highs and the lows and numbered them based on how they were when they happened. Not now looking back when you go, wow, that would be, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have come to Christ. But the bad things at the time were bad. So the first thing is, he hears from God in a dream that he'll be very powerful. I'd give that at least an 8. And then he's thrown down a well because he bragged about it to his brothers. That's a bad one. Then he's taken into slavery. They didn't kill him, but they took him into slavery. Then he excels in slavery and ends up running Potiphar's house. But he's unjustly accused of raping Potiphar's wife, so he gets thrown in prison. But then he gets right back out. Oh, wait, no, he doesn't get right back out, does he? Everybody forgets about him. But the prison is a special prison for members of Pharaoh's government. Joseph continues to excel until he ends up running the prison. Obviously, he's got the gift of administration. While in prison, he interprets the dreams, but when they get out of prison, they forget about him. It's only when the Pharaoh has a dream himself that Joseph finally stands before the seat of power. And he interprets the Pharaoh's dream and advises the leader on next steps. And then his life continues on. So what our homework for you was to go through your life and just do those ups and downs. And they don't have to be perfect, and they don't even have to be in order. But what we want you to start thinking about and allowing God to do is to work with you and say, here's what I've given you. Here's what I've given you in your life that you can give to somebody else. So Todd usually does this much faster and better, I'm sure, than me. And this was his. He accepted Christ, moved to Chicago, moved to Salem, kind of a lateral transfer. Went to football, Bethany, got married, and then divorced. But through the divorce, came closer to Christ. So interestingly, followed by the negative 10 of a divorce is immediately followed by a positive 10. And I think that's what a lot of us are going to see in our lives is if we think back, even the really bad parts of our life, God has redeemed in some way, shape, or another to allow us to use it in a positive way for His glory. Does that make sense? So, what we're going to have you do then is take those life turns that you did and literally plot them. We're going to give you time tonight, and we're going to let you plot them on that timeline.
Fred, would you tell us, timeline back there? Can you go back? Something that stands out to me and something I've experienced. If you look at the very beginning of his timeline, Christ. But you've got to go down, you got to go a few years. That was I can't read.
6 years.
6 or 8 years old.
6 years, 6 months.
6 years, 6 months. And you get to where he's 25 years old, and that's where Jesus comes into play. I don't know how many seeds you all have planted. I don't know how many seeds I've planted. But most of the time, we don't get the fruit of that seed. Occasionally, like the story of the surfer, he got to see the fruit of what he planted. Just know in your heart that what you're doing is important, because you're planting seeds, and after the year's up, you might not think you made any kind of difference whatsoever in that person's life. But you might not ever know. But just trust in God that you did, and He's going to use that.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, that's exactly, I appreciate it. Kirby always says, God doesn't waste anything. So I think there are things sometimes that happen in our life that either He didn't create, I did. I created my own mud hole and then fell backwards into it. Or there are things that other people cause mud holes and push me into them. And there are also things in our life that God just says, this is going to be tough. This is, as my dad always said, buckle it up. It's going to be tough. But regardless of how that tough time came, God promises that He can make good things come from all things for those people whom He loves. Yep. So you're exactly right. You might come out of the year going, wow, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. You might have guys that start the year and don't finish. And God's going to use all of those things and give those guys every opportunity. And then it's up to them. That's why we call this good soil. It's not our job to save anybody. Not only is it not our job to save anybody, even if we want to, we can't. He couldn't save Benton. All he could do is live his life in front of him, and it was up to Benton to accept or not accept. So, plotting your timeline will help you identify the Ebenezers in your life. And the redeemed circumstances in your life. I couldn't be here if that thing didn't happen. They're going to help you tell your story to your mentees in a clearer, more understanding, and I would say in a more God-inspired way. Because it's going to help you listen to God and just remember the things that maybe you haven't thought about in a long time. But God says, remember when that happened. Yep. That's also why I think it's important to do this process every year. Not every guy does, but I think this is really important because it gives God another opportunity to speak into your life. And He may have new things that He wants to bring up to you. And finally, it's going to help you select your topics. So we're in the last 3 sessions here. And at the end of this, what we want you to have is 8 topics that are personal to you and God. That the way I think about it is, if I had, and this is actually how I did mine. I've got a 19-year-old son. And I sat down and I said, if I knew I was dying in a short period of time, what are the most important things I would want him to know? About me, about God, about him, about life. And your mind can go, well, you really ought to think about, but listen to God and listen to your heart. What are the 8 topics? And you don't have to write them down now, but that's what this is building towards, is you being able to look at your life and say, what are the 8 things that I would want to give to, that I have to give to somebody else? Todd was divorced. I'm blessed to not ever be divorced. I can't talk into that for somebody. I can't. I can feel bad for them that it happened or that it's happening or that it could happen. But I can't say, when that happened, this is how I reacted. Can't do it. It's going to be able to give you a better understanding of how God is using your subplot to tell his larger story. And if you can't, don't wait too long, because he can say take a lap. So how is your life and your relationship with your spouse and your relationship with your kids and your relationship in your work and your relationship with your friends, how is that helping him tell his larger story? And lastly, it helps you find purpose from your pain. Probably other than, well, I don't know, this may sound really bad. I was going to say other than the deaths of my parents, which were very painful, but they were painful in a very different way. The most painful probably time in my life is when I was fired from Salina Public Schools. And to this day, I don't have any logical reason for why. And I sat and stared at a wall for a week. Seriously. But I know, as painful as that was, I can graph for you how if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be here doing this tonight. Period. So, we must have another video. We don't. So on your own, we're going to take 30 minutes, 20 minutes, because I talk too much. And I want you to plot your timeline and identify your theme. So once you plot that, then the question then is, as you look at that, what is the theme of your lives, of your life? So Joseph's theme was God is grooming Joseph to save many lives. Todd's theme, at this point in his life when he did this, was new discoveries of God, self, others, and the world. He was in discovery period, understanding all of this. Okay? So you don't have a theme and then that's all that you have to stick with that theme your whole life. But up to this point, how would you describe the theme, your subplot in God's larger narrative? So you're going to plot your timeline, identify your theme. So any questions about what we're doing? Any questions about why we're doing it? Any questions about the end goal? To be able to identify this so that you can begin to really see what is the cup that God has given you that you can pour out. We good? Okay. I'm going to have you start working on this, and I'll call you back at about 8:50.